It was just past 6 in the morning when Donna Ellis first saw it. The sky was still bruised with that sleepy blue-gray, the kind that blankets a small Indiana town before sunrise fully arrives. She was out on her regular jog, sneakers tapping rhythmically along the shoulder of Willow Creek Road, a stretch lined with aging oak trees and quiet fields still heavy with dew. She always passed the same barns, the same faded road signs. But this morning, something was different. About 100 yards ahead, a blue Chevy Impala sat parked awkwardly along the side of the road. Not pulled into the grass like someone might if they needed to stop. No, just barely off the road. Engine humming low. Headlights dim but still on. That part caught Donna's attention. Most cars parked overnight out here didn't leave their engines running. Especially not all night. She slowed her pace. A chill slid up her spine that had nothing to do with the October air. Something about that car didn't feel right. Donna approached cautiously, her breath visible in short clouds. The hum of the engine was steady, almost too steady, like a whisper that had been going on too long. She circled around the passenger side, eyes scanning the windows, now fogged from the inside. Something was definitely off. The door wasn't open, but the glass wasn't fully rolled up either, just enough to let in the cold air, just enough to make the fog uneven. She leaned down slightly, heart pounding harder than it had on her run. That's when she saw him. A man. Slumped forward in the driver's seat. Mid-70s, maybe older. Head resting against the steering wheel, his hands limp in his lap. For a moment she froze, unsure if she was looking at a body. But then, just barely, she saw his chest rise. Once. Then again. Still breathing. Her hand went to her phone instinctively. 911. She'd never had to call them before. She was the kind of woman who baked for the neighbors and volunteered at the library. But in that moment, Donna knew something bigger than her was happening. And she was now part of it. Deputy Carter pulled up in less than 10 minutes. Around town, everyone just called him Bear, a nickname from his army days that stuck long after his uniform changed to brown and tan. He was in his early 70s now, like the man in the car, with silver hair pulled into a short ponytail and a cane he refused to use unless absolutely necessary. Bear stepped out of his cruiser slowly, reading the situation like a well-worn map. Donna pointed toward the Chevy. "He's alive, but barely," she said, voice tight. "Engine's been running all night. I think he's hurt." Bear knocked gently on the window. No response. He pulled a glove from his coat pocket and opened the door. The man inside groaned softly, his head rolling toward Bear's voice. His skin was pale, lips tinged blue. On his hands dried blood. Cracked, dark, flaking. But no visible wounds. "What happened to you, old soldier?" Bear muttered. Then, faintly, the man whispered something. Just one line. Barely audible. "Don't let them find her." Bear leaned closer, eyes narrowing. Who are you talking about?" he asked quietly. The man's gaze flickered, struggling to focus. His voice was a rasp, cracked like dry earth. "Her, the girl, she's still out there." Bear's heart sank. In a small town like Maple Ridge, mysteries didn't usually come wrapped in blood and whispered warnings. But this felt different. Donna stood nearby, biting her lip. She watched as Bear called for paramedics, then gently closed the door, careful not to disturb the man's fragile state. The car's engine hummed on, like a heartbeat hanging in limbo. Who was this man? And who was the girl he begged them not to find? In that quiet morning light, the engine was the only sound, a low, steady thrum that carried more questions than answers. When paramedics finally arrived, the man was barely conscious. Amid the blur of activity, one of them noticed a small, worn photograph folded carefully in the breast pocket of his jacket. Sheriff Linda Monroe, who arrived shortly after, examined the photo under the harsh hospital lights. The picture showed a little girl, no older than 9, smiling shyly, her eyes bright with innocence. On the back, a childlike heart was drawn in red pen, simple, imperfect, but filled with meaning. No names. No dates. Just the photo. Linda's instincts kicked in. This was no ordinary case. A man, alone and bleeding, carrying a photo of a child who might be in danger. She looked up from the picture and met Donna's gaze across the room. "We have to find her," Linda said softly. "And fast." The hospital staff kept the man stable but tight-lipped. Without ID or a phone, they had little to go on. Sheriff Monroe started digging. The car's rental records led to a man named Eli Barker, from Chicago, but the name was fake, a dead end. Fingerprints taken during his intake told a different story. The man was Tommy Rourke. Tommy, 72, a former Army medic who disappeared from a VA hospital in Dayton 3 weeks earlier. A ghost of a man, with no family listed in official records. No recent address. Nothing that tied him back to a life anyone knew. Linda's gut told her there was more to this story, something buried under decades of silence and pain. Because in a town like Maple Ridge, secrets had a way of coming out. 2 days into the investigation, the sheriff's office phone rang. A woman's voice, hesitant but steady, came through. I think that's my father," she said, her voice breaking. "But he died 20 years ago." Her name was Natalie. A teacher living in Dayton. She'd seen the news report and recognized Tommy immediately. Linda leaned back in her chair, stunned. How could a man believed dead for 2 decades suddenly show up miles away, vulnerable and broken? Natalie shared a story of a childhood shattered, her mother's death, her father's sudden disappearance, and a lifetime spent wondering what really happened. Now all those questions were about to demand answers. Natalie arrived in Maple Ridge 2 days later, her heart a tangled mess of hope and fear. Walking into the hospital room felt like stepping into a ghost story she'd long buried. Tommy lay pale and fragile, his eyes clouded but lighting up the moment she spoke her name. "I'm your daughter," she whispered, tears spilling over. He tried to speak but only managed a hoarse croak. Years of silence filled the space between them. Natalie saw the pain etched deep into his face, the guilt, the regret, the loneliness. It wasn't just a reunion. It was the beginning of healing wounds no one had dared to touch for years. Because sometimes, family isn't about perfect stories, it's about finding each other again, even in broken places. Natalie reached out and took the worn photo from Tommy's trembling hand. She traced the faint red heart on the back with a finger, memories flooding back. "That's me," she said softly. "When I was 9. Tommy's eyes welled with tears. He had carried that photo everywhere, through hospital rooms, halfway houses, and lonely nights in cheap motel beds. It was more than a picture. It was a lifeline. A reminder of what he'd lost, and what he was trying to protect. But the blood on his hands? Natalie asked, voice barely steady. Tommy's breath hitched. "It's not what you think. I found someone who needed help." Her curiosity piqued. What had he been through in the days before he was found? Tommy's voice was weak but steady as he explained. "I found a girl on the side of the highway. Barefoot, bruised, scared. Probably no older than 14. She was running from something, or someone." He paused, swallowing hard. "Used my old medic skills to tend to her wounds. Tried to get her to a safe place, but she panicked and ran into the woods." The nights grew colder, and his knees weren't what they used to be. He searched for her for hours, desperate and exhausted. Eventually, he had no choice but to pull over and wait for morning. That's when Donna found him, the car still running, engine never turned off. Tommy's sacrifice, his kindness, had saved a life. But it almost cost him his own. As news of Tommy's story spread through Maple Ridge, volunteers joined the search for the runaway girl. Local farmers, retired teachers, even teenagers put down their morning routines to comb the woods and barns around Willow Creek Road. Days passed. Cold nights gave way to chilly mornings filled with worry. Then the call came. She'd been found, cold, hungry, scared, but alive, in an old barn just miles from where Tommy's car had been parked. Relief washed over the town like rain after a long drought. Tommy's act of kindness had not only saved the girl but had reawakened a community that had almost forgotten how to care for each other. In their search for her, they found something else, a glimpse of hope in the shadow of loneliness. As Tommy rested in the hospital, Natalie stayed by his side, helping him face the ghosts of a lifetime. She asked questions about his years away, the pain he'd carried, and the silence that had swallowed their family. Tommy's voice trembled as he told her about the war, the things he'd seen, the friends he lost, the nights he couldn't sleep. About his wife, who died from cancer, leaving him adrift and alone. About the guilt that made him run from everything he knew, even his own daughter. Their conversations were slow, heavy with unspoken emotions. But in that quiet hospital room, the first threads of forgiveness began to weave a fragile bridge between past and present. Outside the hospital, Maple Ridge buzzed quietly with a renewed spirit. The story of Tommy and the runaway girl touched every corner. Church groups organized care packages, neighbors offered rides and blankets, and local diners held fundraisers for the girl's recovery. In a town where everyone knew your name, the ripples of kindness ran deep. People who once passed each other with nods now stopped to ask how they could help. For Tommy, this was unfamiliar territory, being cared for instead of hiding away. Yet, it gave him a glimpse of what he'd lost and what might still be possible. The community's compassion became a balm for old wounds, proving that even in the quietest places, love could be loud enough to save a life. Tommy's story wasn't just about kindness. It was a portrait of a veteran's burden, carried quietly for decades. He had fought in Vietnam, seen horrors that no one in Maple Ridge could imagine. The scars weren't just on his skin, but etched deep inside his soul, nightmares, guilt, and the crushing weight of survival. His wife's death pushed him over the edge. He drifted, lost in a fog of grief and PTSD, abandoning the life he once had. Yet, even in his darkest moments, the instincts of a medic, the urge to protect and care, remained alive. Finding the runaway girl stirred something inside him, a flicker of purpose amid the pain. Sometimes, second chances come when you least expect them. Natalie and Tommy's talks grew deeper, unearthing memories long buried. He confessed the unspoken truths, the times he wanted to call her but couldn't find the strength. The nights he imagined her grown, happy, but feared he was just a ghost in her life. Natalie admitted her own wounds, how his absence shaped her childhood with fear, anger, and unanswered questions. Yet, they both knew healing wasn't about blame. It was about understanding the fragility of human hearts. Their reunion wasn't a fix but a beginning, a fragile thread to weave together what time had unraveled. In the quiet hospital room, two lost souls started the slow journey back to each other. Meanwhile, the runaway girl's story began to unfold. Her name was Sarah, 14 years old, from a neighboring county. She had fled an abusive home, desperate for freedom but scared of what lay ahead. Tommy's intervention had been her lifeline, an unexpected guardian in a world that felt unsafe. As Sarah recovered, she shared bits of her story with the community, her fears, her hopes, the weight of loneliness she carried. Maple Ridge didn't just save her life physically, they began to offer her a chance to belong. For Sarah, and for Tommy, it was proof that kindness could break through even the darkest night. Maple Ridge wrapped Sarah in warmth, neighbors offered clothes, teachers made room in their schedules, and local volunteers opened their hearts. The town's embrace wasn't just about charity, it was about connection, a reminder that no one should face their battles alone. For Tommy, seeing this was bittersweet. He'd spent years isolated, convinced he was beyond help. But watching a community rally around a scared teenager rekindled something in him. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, second chances weren't just for strangers. Maybe they were for him too. Tommy never saw himself as a hero. To him, he was just an old man, worn thin by life's battles. But sometimes, heroes don't wear medals or get headlines. They simply show up when it matters most. His decision to keep his engine running overnight was more than a mechanical choice. It was a beacon, a way to stay alert, ready, waiting for someone who needed him. That car, parked and humming in the cold dawn, became a symbol of unwavering vigilance. A reminder that even in the shadows, acts of kindness can light the way. Months later, Maple Ridge gathered for a small ceremony at the town hall. Sarah, now smiling with the tentative confidence of a child who's tasted safety, stood beside Tommy and Natalie. The crowd applauded quietly, many wiping tears away. Tommy, once a lonely soldier haunted by ghosts, was now embraced as a father, a protector, and a friend. Natalie, who'd carried the weight of unanswered questions, finally found peace. And Sarah, the runaway girl, found a home where she could begin to dream again. The car's engine might have been left running that night, but the real story was about hearts left open, and the power of second chances. Sometimes, life's quiet moments hold the loudest truths. That old Chevy Impala, parked on the side of Willow Creek Road with its engine never turned off, was more than a car, it was a testament. A testament to sacrifice, to kindness born from pain, and to the invisible battles so many fight alone. Tommy's story reminds us that even when we feel broken or forgotten, there's always a chance to start over. That engine's hum was a heartbeat, steady, unyielding, a promise to keep going, to keep caring, even when the world seems cold. And in that promise lies the true power of family, of community, and of hope. Because sometimes, the longest journeys begin with the simplest acts.